Safe maternity care, reducing mortality and morbidity. We're using the road safety analogy today. The point of this lecture is to emphasize the fact that safety in maternity goes beyond training doctors and training midwives. So when we use the road analogy, when we look at safety on our roads, we look at training drivers. So you make sure drivers have the technical know-how to be able to start an engine, to move a car, to be able to use the indicators, to be able to show their reverse lights, to be able to turn on their front lights, to use the equipment efficiently. And in the same way, maternity, that is basic. We want to make sure our doctors and midwives have the technical skills, can perform safe cesarean section, safe instrumental delivery, safe perineal repair. So this is one of the things we focus on in maternity, to try and improve safety, reduce morbidity and mortality by teaching skills. And that is important. But is that all we need? Beyond that, in the driver's analogy, every driver needs to know the highway code. They need to understand the road signs. So apart from being able to move a car, you also need to understand the signs on the highway to be able to become a safe driver and reduce accidents. In the same way, in maternity care, we need to make sure we understand the theory and the practice. So we understand, we read textbooks, we teach people the theory so that they understand why they need to implement the skills that they have and when to deploy those skills. So that is also fundamental to safety and reduce mortality. And we do really well with these first two. We teach technical skills, we teach theory. But is that all we need to do to ensure safety? We need to design safety into maternity care. So safety in design, or design for safety. In the road analogy, just having a driver who can move a car and a driver who knows the highway code is not enough. You have to design the road for safety. So you have to design the road with road markings. You cannot just put a blank asphalted road there without any markings. You put traffic lights, you put road signs, you put hazard signs, you teach hazard perception. Designing safety into the road ensures that people can find it easy to do the right thing. If you come to a roundabout and there are no road markings there, it's difficult to navigate. But if you have road markings there, it helps with easy navigation. So we say we reduce error by design. And how does this apply to maternity? For example, if you have one midwife taking care of two women, one high-risk woman and one normal labor, you expect this midwife probably to be checking the blood pressure every 15 minutes for this high-risk, high blood pressure woman. You expect that same midwife to be monitoring her contractions and to be monitoring the contractions of the second woman. By design, this is not possible because by the time the midwife will monitor contractions for 10 minutes, check blood pressure, give medication, repeat the blood pressure in about 15 minutes, give another medication, check vitals, check FH, plot. They would have missed the time to check their contractions and do the same thing for the other woman. So by design, by giving one midwife these two women, you have designed into the system that this midwife cannot monitor one of them. So you have caused an unsafe situation by design alone. Another example is having pre-packed kits. And most maternity units will have a pre-packed PPH kit, a pre-packed hypoglycemia kit, a pre-packed eclampsia kit. Imagine a unit that doesn't have this kit. So when you have a PPH, you're now going around to look for stuff. By design, you've made the situation unsafe because by the time you're able to find things to assemble your condom tamponade, by the time you're able to find your ergometrin, your oxytocin from the fridge, find your misoprostol, get somebody to go and buy a misoprostol, the woman will be dead because we know the blood flow through the uterus is huge. We're talking about 500 to 800 mils per minute. So if you don't have a pre-packed kit, by design, you have designed for an unsafe situation. Let's talk about something like a sepsis implementation. You want to apply sepsis 6 in your pathways. By design, you want to give antibiotics within the first golden hour. You want to do some bloods. You want to pass a catheter. You want to give fluids. If someone has to now go and buy bottles for blood cultures, by design, you cannot implement sepsis 6. If someone has to go and procure bottles for bloods, by design, you cannot. If someone has to go and buy the catheter, by design, you cannot implement the sepsis 6. So if you don't have a sepsis 6 box with everything needed to implement sepsis 6, and somebody now has to go and buy the antibiotics, by design, you cannot implement it. So this will not be solved by more training or by teaching more technical skills. The environment has not been designed for safety, so you cannot implement safety. If you do not have a crash cart assembled with people knowing how to use their crash cart, knowing how to use your AEDs, knowing when to tell whether there's a shockable or non-shockable rhythm and how to use the equipment, by design, the system cannot resuscitate a woman efficiently. So it will not be the fault of the staff if a patient who has a shockable rhythm comes in and dies. You have not designed the system for safety. Another example is oxytocin drips. If we are using gravity drip sets and you're having a lot of situations where you go and come and 500 mils is going in about 30 minutes. By design, this system, you can reduce error by putting an infusion pump in this system so that it does not depend on people. By design, you will not go and come back and meet 500 mils gone because there's an infusion pump in there for safety. So designing for safety, this is what we mean by designing for safety. Again, when you look at the road safety analogy, apart from teaching drivers how to move cars and teaching the highway code and designing the roads for safety, there are certain high-risk areas where you put in additional designs. So, for example, in front of a school, you have to put in a mark, road sign to show that this is a school. Speed limits show there. You have flashing lights to show that this is a school area. There are kids roaming around. There are road markings to show that you cannot park in this area, and there are cameras around to enforce these. So you've put in additional design in this area because you know it's a high-risk area. In the same way, there are high-risk areas in maternity care. For example, when you're doing a cesarean section, we've put in a surgical safety checklist. So you do your swab counts because we know that there's a high-risk area where you can lose swabs in the abdomen. So you have your surgical safety checklist to help you to account for this. So you do your swab check. Some people will do it even 3 times when the uterus is being closed, when the fascia is being closed, and when you are finishing the surgery, so that you know that you've put safety in the design. And you know that at each point, there's no way you're leaving a swab in. Another common area where we leave swabs in is when we do an instrumental delivery and perineal repair. If you've done an instrumental delivery as an emergency before, if there was no checklist on the labor ward, you probably would do it without emptying the bladder, for instance. Or you could finish and not do a swab count. And these are the common errors. If you have a checklist there, you have designed safety in there, and you've put additional measures in the system for a high-risk area, so that you don't ever have a never event where a swab has been left in the mother's vagina, because you designed it so that at the end of the check, you do a swab count, you sign, the person doing the count with you signs that your swab count is correct. So you've built safety in this system. Again, you build a warning system in road safety. So for instance, when there's going to be heavy rain, there's warning all around that there's heavy rain. So the driver adjusts their driving. They know the speed they can go because they know their braking distance when it's raining. So this is additional safety. And if you don't warn people, they may not know they are going to meet heavy rain. So they may have technical skills, they may have the knowledge, but you have to warn them to be able to apply the knowledge. Again, in maternity, we have an early warning system where you're constantly monitoring people. And when people are triggering these early warning, they're triggering a yellow or triggering a red, you get a doctor or senior midwife involved. So you design these into your system to try and reduce mortality. Again, it's not just the technical and design part. You also have to design for human behavior. So in driving, you eschew things like road rage, drunk driving, and these are punishable. In maternity, you also have to account for human behavior, and this is what we call the non-technical skills. So you look at things like situational awareness. If you do not teach situational awareness, you will still have problems in spite of people being knowledgeable and having the skills. Having situational awareness is teaching doctors, teaching midwives to be always conscious of the environment around them, having a helicopter view, especially in the labor ward, because things happen very quickly. Teaching communication skills, teaching leadership skills. These are all important. Teaching decision-making skills. For situational awareness, we say that a doctor who is situationally aware is always collecting information, is able to interpret information, and anticipate future events. If you've ever heard of scenarios where a patient goes into second stage, is in second stage for 5 hours, nobody knows on the labor ward. That is a lack of situational awareness. Or a consultant walks into a labor ward, asks, who is this patient on bed one? Nobody knows. That is how maternal mortalities happen, a lack of situational awareness. Or patients' urine output is dropping. Nobody has been able to point that out. Doctors are not aware. The midwife monitoring is not aware. That's a lack of situational awareness. So situational awareness has to be taught. And these are non-technical skills that makes it safer on the labor ward. Having the labor ward board is absolutely important because at a glance, everybody knows what is happening on the labor ward. Who needs a VE next? Who has to go to section? How do we prioritize section? Is somebody pushing in second stage? If somebody is pushing with a pathological CTG, do we need to await that delivery before we take an elective section in? Because we are going to have a category 1 section on our hands if the woman doesn't deliver, or a trial in theatre. So we need to have situational awareness, and labor or dashboard is an important tool that we use for that. Halt. If you're hungry, angry, or you're late, lonely or late or tired, these are things that we use in maternity a lot. If you feel that you are late, it's better you hand over or you catch yourself, because when you are late, you do things haphazardly and leave. If you're hungry or angry, you do things haphazardly and leave. So you need to be able to be conscious of this. Communication using SBAR is also very important. Escalation tools. When you wake a consultant up or you wake a senior doctor up at night, the first thing they want to know is whether you want advice, you want information, or you want them to do something. So teaching proper escalation tools is very, very important. You wake me up, I need you to come in. That should be the first thing before we have a discussion. I want to inform you, or I want your advice. I mean, you tell them this, and then your SBAR follows. So teaching proper escalation is very important. When you call somebody to a CTG, teach or treat. So you're either going to teach them something they didn't know, so that they may be so worried about a trace which you think is normal, so you teach. You don't go there and dismiss them, or you just shout at them for calling you. No, you teach or treat. So proper escalation is very important. We also talk about incivility. We know that rude surgeons impair anesthesia performance. And when a surgeon is polite, anesthesia performance about 91%. When a surgeon is rude, anesthesia performance drops to about 63%. And this is proven in research. And it doesn't matter how much training you have given. If you don't teach civility in your workspace, then you're going to have low performance and morbidity because of things like this. And incivility doesn't just affect the people directly involved. People who observe incivility also reduce performance. By seeing you being rude to somebody, they also reduce performance. Team performance is also reduced. So this is not technical skills, but then it affects performance, it affects outcome. We know that surgeons who receive a lot of complaints for being rude, have a higher rate of wound infection, for instance. Leadership is also important in civility. And it's like farting in a lift. If you fart in a lift, you feel good, but everybody else feels bad and their performance is bad. Another important part of road safety is traffic control. Somebody having an overhead view of all that is happening on the road, directing traffic, decongesting areas. This is very important. And the driver may be skilled or not. To be safe, you have to decongest areas on the road. In maternity, we have what we call a dashboard system, where there are key indicators that we monitor: our operative delivery rate, our cesarean section rate. We monitor these month on month and know where we are going in the red, where we are in the green means we are keeping on course, and where we exceed in target, so that we can bring things within target. So this is also another important tool. Again, for roads to be safe, you need law enforcement, you need speed cameras, highway patrols. In maternity, is leadership. So leadership is very important. Supervision is also absolutely important. And if we borrow from highly effective leader, the leadership has to be proactive. Leadership has to have vision. You have to begin with the end in mind. You have to put first things first, know how to prioritize. They have to sharpen their focus, synergize, and seek first to understand rather than being understood. So that's leadership. Supervision means insight readiness. The consultant should be ready to come in. The consultant should know what is happening on the labor ward, and these are all important. Again, you should have emergency measures in road safety. And in maternity, how do we call for help when there's an emergency? If a woman is being delivered and there's an acute bradycardia, how do you call for help? Do you leave the woman and go shouting? In efficient systems, they have an emergency buzzer. You pull it, there's an alarm, everybody comes in. So that care continues, you've called for help. And that is how we call for help. The woman is bleeding heavily. Do we have a major obstetric hemorrhage protocol? How do we call people? How do we get blood from the blood transfusion service? How do we get hematology involved? How do we get the anesthetist there? There has to be a call-out system. Is there a code system for maternal collapse? How do you get people involved in a maternal collapse? Does somebody have to run up the stairs? Because by the time they run up the stairs to call somebody and come down, your 4-minute window is probably up for a perimortem. So all these things are important. So to summarize all of it, safety of a driver is not just based on knowing the highway code or knowing how to move a car. Knowing the design of the road is very important. Additional measures in high-risk areas is very important. Road traffic control is very important. Car breakdown services, law enforcement is very important. All of these put together make a safe system. In the same way, in maternity, we cannot create safe maternity by just teaching technical skills and teaching textbook. We have to design for safety. We have to teach non-technical skills. Thank you.